Good morning. So I really wish I could be at your school today. Unfortunately, due to a turn of events, I won't be able to make it, but I'd still love to share my experience with you and I'm grateful for the opportunity. So I'm going to go through some of these questions that I received. The first one is, how did you decide on your current career path? Who or what experiences influenced you? So yeah, trying to think back to my high school career. Hanging in there, guys. Life gets better. Uh, you know, I think back in high school, I didn't know what I was gonna do with my life. I remember going through classes, just classes and then tests and tests, and thinking, why am I doing these things? Why am I learning what I'm learning? How does it apply to the real life, right? I think one important thing to remember is that life doesn't have to begin after school. Your life is now. That I wish I had pushed myself more on was to take subjects that I thought I wasn't great at. For example, maths. I thought that I wasn't naturally good at math, and so I took a lot of the classes that I knew I would be great at in terms of grades. So they weren't the hardest level maths, and I was fine with that. And in college, I think again I didn't push myself to engage with those classes. And one thing is that it's not really so much about the classes and grades themselves. It's the type of pattern that you set yourself up in life. When you meet a challenge, how do you greet it? Do you work hard to overcome it, right? Or do you just kind of like stay away from it completely? Now, I'm not saying to not focus on the things that you're good at. That's very important. But if you have the opportunity, especially in school, there really is no huge consequence, I think. Um, I'd say like go for it, like try your best and overcome that fear and mental block in terms of what you can and can't accomplish. Yeah, so that's what I would say that I would do differently back in high school. College, I also didn't know what I was going to do with my life. I did a lot of exploring. I switched around. First, I thought I was going to do, go into politics, and I thought I was going to go, there are lots of turn of events, and I would say that people are going to tell you, why can't you just figure out what you want with your life? Why can't you just stick to one thing and not try and explore different things? Well, here's the thing, like they're not you, and you have to live your life, and it's okay to explore, right? I would say that just have a plan. You can always change that plan, but always try and have a plan and a goal that you're trying to work towards. And I think it's okay to be flexible, and only you can decide that for yourself. What was tremendous for me was that I joined a organization called the Global Leadership Conference, and it was a time for me to learn tools on how to be a leader. I at the time I didn't see myself as a leader. I didn't know what that really meant at all. And I think that really pushing yourself to potentially try a role that you're afraid of or you're not comfortable with, it adds a lot of character to you, and adding a lot of dimensions that you never knew that you could even be in. And so I would recommend, if you have an opportunity to hone those skills, whether it's starting a club on campus or joining one of these clubs conferences like I mentioned, highly recommend that. The thing about the things that you learn along the way, especially something like the conference that I was at, is that a lot of the skills don't really kick in places that you think they will. And for example, the conference itself gave me the courage to start projects that I wanted to do. In my senior year in college, I started a lot of different projects. One project in particular that I felt, I guess, proud of is I wanted to do something about the issue of recycling and people not knowing how to recycle, and I'm very passionate about youth education. And so, what do you do about that, right? I found a way to recruit about 24 students, and together we basically formed a class and completed this project. It's an online game, and you can find it at Recycle, so resci.cool. And the game itself is called Cool Ways to Recycle. And so like I said, the skills that you learn come in ways that you really don't expect. One, it's the courage that it gave me, right, to start this project in itself. And two, it gave me the skills, for example, project management and team building and all sorts of soft skills that you learn and hard skills that really contribute to things that you can make out of thin air that you never knew that you could. So, highly recommend taking the initiative to do that because in college, if you really think about college, you are paying a lot of money so that an institution could get a lot of brilliant people in the same room together. And then what do they do with that? They just have you listen in class and give you grades so that you can work hard to prove yourself for those grades. So if you really think about that, that's what you're paying for. And you really want to try and make the most out of your experience, right? So how do you maximize your potential through extracurricular activities, right? I think that I've learned far more outside of my classes than I ever have inside of my classes. So that's really something to think about. Found out about this field, decided to stay a fourth year to study, design, business, and entrepreneurship. It's something I was always very interested in, and I think that again, at the time, I felt like a lot of people would ask me, "But you majored in this, so why are you going into that?" Well, here's the thing: your major doesn't define who you are. Just because that's what you studied doesn't mean that's the only dimension that you can offer in this world, right? So, I mean, I used to always think, people majoring different things, we must think so differently because, we're in such a different fields. But really, maybe everyone is just on a different path, but maybe we're all trying to do the same thing. Maybe we are all trying to find a way to contribute to society in a meaningful way. And in that sense, we're not so different, right? Maybe we just choose different styles of problem solving. Different people have different ways of problem solving because of their backgrounds. And that's something that you can offer as well in terms of a different perspective, right? For example, in my day to day job, you can imagine thinking about different types of users that your product might serve and how might they experience your product differently and how might you design differently based on those different types of needs. What happens when this user leaves this area and does X task? Even though we are trying to come up with a solution for X, how might this user use it differently than we might expect? So there's a lot of things that go into, I think, problem solving, especially for design, in terms of coming up with a solution and innovating and figuring out the best possible experience for a customer or end user. So what might it look like to work at a tech company and be a product designer? Well, one thing that you might want to be equipped with is number one, an eye for aesthetics. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to be really great at visual design or graphic design, but you do need to have an eye for something looks good or right or not. The second thing is love for logic and system levels thinking in terms of experiences and how people think. How do people naturally, what frustrates them, what delights them? If they see something that you've designed, what might confuse them? Those are things that you probably want to, for me, it comes very naturally. For you, it might not. And that's something that you can explore and certainly improve on. The third thing is working with people. So there is a lot of talking to people, talking to customers, getting their feedback, iterating on your work to make sure that you are actually designing for the person in mind, right? The end user in mind, and actually solving their problems. So one thing that I really didn't think about at first, especially in high school, is about the soft skills aspect, right? There's so much of work that people don't maybe talk about, but a lot of it is about persuasion and influence. And I would really start any type of group project that you can get your hands on in high school and college, that's definitely something to really, really consider doing. And it's not just always going to be about what you can accomplish and what the process looks like, but it really is how do you interact with different people? How do you say things in a way to make them willingly do something, right? That's it's a nuance. It's kind of like happening in the background all the time on a day to day, and that's really how things get done. But that's not something people tell you that you need to work on. So I would recommend this book. It's called How to Win Friends and Influence People, and it's a time. It's a classic. So that's a resource that I would recommend. Look like I'm going to be able to get through all the questions, but I'm going to pick and choose here. The next one is about what's the best piece of career advice you've received. So this one isn't a career advice. I think I might have just stumbled upon this, but let me just quickly show you. So at the top, I have what you love, and then what you're good at, and what society needs. And kind of that overlap in the middle is the part that you might choose to do in life. And it's funny, right? No one really broke it down for me in high school in terms of, how to figure out what I want to do in life. And I think right now I feel like I am hitting these things. And how am I hitting these things? So number one, I love what I do. I love design. I think I'm good at it, right? So I really practice, and it's something I think, especially certain areas of problem solving, I am naturally good at. And I work at a company that services people who are blind and visually impaired. And even though, we don't have millions of customers, I think that what we do does make a difference. It's very tangible in their everyday lives, being given visual information when they need it. That's what we provide for them. And even something as very simple as being able to sort mail in the morning, or have your daughter's wedding described as she's walking down the aisle, without having to ask someone next to you to describe it for you. That's something. It might not solve all the world's problems, but it solves something for a specific subset of people. And that's the challenge that I give you. What's something that you feel you could make a difference with? So, I mean, not everyone has to go off and try and save the world, but at a minimum, we want to do no harm, I think, is the baseline. And what's another piece of advice? I think one thing that my friend told me about was about picking a problem space that you want to focus on tackling in your career, and then picking a skill that you feel you're good at and you love, something that you can really develop over time. And together, instead of being the top 10% of one specific problem space, or the top 10% of one specific skill set, together the problem set plus skill, you could do wonders. To give an example, one problem space could be, energy, or sustainability, what have you. A skill set could be, software engineering or design, So the more niche you can go, I think the more you can stand out. Question: if we wanted to follow a similar path, what steps would you recommend for high school students like us? So real quick, I want to drop a resource. It's called 80,000hours.org. The reason why it's titled like that is because, they say you only have 80,000 hours in your career. What kind of impact do you want to make? What makes a meaningful career? I recommend checking out that resource to maybe help figure out what you might want to do. Now, certain jobs might not require a college degree, but oftentimes, in STEM, you do. So, you might want to figure that part out. In terms of a path, there's no set path, of course. I can only share, my own experience and maybe give some guidelines. So my own experience is that shortly after I discovered, design thinking in this field, I joined our campus's design org, and I became part of their board as a marketing chair. And through that, you get more exposure to what the field is like, and you meet different people in terms of, making friends. And, when you graduate, it's a small community, right? You end up really, eventually probably bumping into each other. So whatever you say, whatever you do, it all matters. It's not like you graduate and you just forget about your past life. So really try and make those connections when you can. After college, I did a couple internships. Eventually, I showed up at an event at my school, at my university after I had graduated, and there's a speaker who was also an alum, but he was working at a company and he was looking for an intern. And I found out, I went in for an interview and found out that they weren't going to be paying, but he did refer me to another head of design at a company in the same building. And so I ended up interviewing with this other company in the same building and was hired as a UX researcher. And so, that's all really crazy, right? Like, one thing leads to another, and that's really what life is like. You you take those opportunities. Nobody's going to create those opportunities for you. You just have to, no one cares, How do you make them care? There's this quote I really like, and it's, luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. So you hear a lot, I just got lucky or whatnot. They didn't just get lucky. It's that when an opportunity came, they were prepared, and then they took the action to engage with that opportunity. And that's what lands them, quote unquote success, or however you want to call it. So what can you do to prepare yourself, right? Every day. Right now I'm reading a book called Atomic Habits, just a quick shout out there. It's about building good habits and breaking bad habits. And if you're interested in psychology and the whole self-development arena, I highly recommend this book. Going on to securing this job, I started off as a UX researcher, and in UX design, UX research is kind of like the part where you understand the problems and your users and your customer pain points, and then it's really the understanding phase, and design is a lot of times more the problem solving phase of, what do you do about those problems? What kind of solutions can we come up with? So I transitioned from a UX researcher to a UX designer shortly, and I've been working here for about 2 years now, and I love it. And that's my experience. And for you, something that could be helpful is if you decide to choose a major, something like cognitive science. UCSD has a really strong cognitive science program. But obviously choosing a human-computer interaction, short phrase, the abbreviation is HCI, or psychology or computer science, those are all degrees that if you decide to go to grad school, they will probably look at. But if you're not going to grad school, then your degree, I would say, doesn't matter as much. Other than, I guess, if you wanted to go to bigger companies like Google and their recruiting process, they sometimes tend to screen for certain names or schools, or majors, and maybe that matters. But to be honest, it is such a new field that people come from all backgrounds, and there really isn't a set type of major that you really, really need to have. Again, it's just the approach in which you adhere to on a day-to-day, such as design thinking, and it's about how you problem solve and how you work with people. That's probably more important than anything that you might choose to major in. What do you want to do in the future with your career? So I'd like to continue to hone my skills. I think at this phase of my career, so I should have mentioned I'm 24. I'm turning 25 this year. So not too much older. So hopefully still like relatable. I would like to one day, be a quote unquote social entrepreneur. I don't know, I did that just now. Um, uh, Probably because I haven't engaged in that in a while since college. In college, I understood the ecosystem of what people wanted, and how to find the right people to get the things to make things happen. But in the real world, everyone has their own lives, has kids, their own schedule going on, and so I'm trying to figure out the ecosystem here and what makes someone might just engage in a passion project that maybe eventually leads to a business one day. So again, social entrepreneur, what does it mean? It's essentially using business to do good. And when I say good, it's a little nebulous, but make some form of impact, uh, especially for people who might be not have as much as others, right? So, what's an example of a social business? Zipline, and they essentially develop drones to transport vaccines and blood supplies in third world countries because maybe their roads and infrastructure are not as good in terms of getting a truck go from one place to another really quickly and efficiently. So, that's amazing. That's using business and technology to address a specific problem and making an impact on that. And it might not save every single person in the world, but it's doing something. And that's what I aspire to do one day. Right now, my career, I want to be focused on skill building, but eventually, more on the leadership side, and be potentially starting my own business and doing something much like maybe what this company is doing. And I don't know exactly how to get there, but I'm gonna try. I know it's not super well fleshed out because I have to go to jury duty in 1 second here. So I hope this was helpful, and good luck.